The old man stood at the window of his small apartment and watched the ships pass overhead. They were cruisers, long and silver, moving through Earth's sky like they owned it, and in many ways they did. Admiral Daniel Mercer was 67 years old. His hair had turned white long ago, and his hands sometimes shook when he held his morning coffee, but his eyes were still sharp. They were the eyes of a man who remembered things that most humans had forgotten. 1,000 years ago, humanity had ruled the stars. They had built fleets that stretched across 3 galaxies. They had fought wars and won them. They had been respected. They had been feared. Then came the betrayal. The collective had smiled and offered friendship. The Dominion had promised trade agreements. The Empire had spoken of lasting peace. And while humanity celebrated these new alliances, the three powers had secretly united against them. The final battle happened above. Daniel had read the old records so many times that he could see it in his mind. 2,000 human warships against the combined fleets of 3 civilizations. The humans had fought bravely. They had destroyed 5 enemy ships for every one they lost, but it was not enough. There were simply too many enemies. When the last human flagship exploded in the cold darkness of space, the war was over. The treaty that followed was designed to break humanity forever. Humans could no longer build warships. They could no longer train soldiers. They could no longer carry weapons beyond their home system. Earth and its few remaining colonies became what the aliens called a protected zone. It was a polite way of saying prison. Daniel turned away from the window and sat down at his desk. On the wall behind him hung a painting of an old naval vessel from Earth's ancient oceans. It was the only decoration in his apartment. It reminded him of a time when humans had been explorers and warriors, not zoo animals. His computer blinked with a new message. He opened it and read the words carefully. It was from Tors, one of his best students. "The network is ready," the message said, "waiting for your orders." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. For 300 years, his family had kept the old traditions alive. His grandfather had trained his father. His father had trained him. And he had trained hundreds of others, all in secret, all waiting for the day that might never come. They called themselves the Historical Reenactment Society. They met in basements and abandoned buildings, pretending to study old wars for academic purposes. But they were not studying history. They were preparing for the future. Meanwhile, across the city, Tors was finishing her shift at the cargo dock. She was 32 years old, with dark hair and tired eyes. To anyone watching, she was just another human worker, loading boxes onto transport ships for alien merchants who barely looked at her. But had a secret. In her mind, she was running tactical simulations. Every ship that passed overhead, she analyzed its weak points. Every alien guard she saw, she calculated how to defeat them. She had been doing this since she was 12 years old when her father first introduced her to Admiral Mercer. "You have a gift," the Admiral had told her. "A gift for war. It is both a blessing and a curse. But someday your people will need that gift." Had believed him. She still believed him. That evening, she walked through the streets of New Chicago. The city had been rebuilt after the war, but it never felt like home. Alien advertisements floated in the air, selling products that humans could not afford. Alien tourists walked past, taking pictures of humans like they were interesting animals. A group of young males stood on a corner, laughing loudly. One of them pointed at an old human man who was struggling to carry groceries. They said something in their language, and they all laughed harder. The old man kept his head down and walked faster. Felt her hands tighten into fists. She wanted to hurt them. She wanted to show them what humans were truly capable of. But she forced herself to keep walking. The time was not right. Not yet. On the other side of the planet, Ambassador was preparing for another day at the Galactic Council. He was 55 years old, a tall man with gray at his temples and permanent sadness in his eyes. He had been Earth's representative for 15 years. 15 years of insults, 15 years of being ignored, 15 years of watching his people suffer while the galaxy laughed. His assistant, a young woman named Rachel, brought him his morning briefing. "They are demanding increased tribute again," she said quietly. "They want 20% more grain from the New Haven colony." Closed his eyes. New Haven was already struggling. The colonists barely had enough food for themselves. Another tribute increase would mean children going hungry. "And if we refuse?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "They have threatened to send a reminder of human obligations." Rachel's voice was bitter. "Their words, not mine." A reminder. That was what the aliens called it when they sent ships to bomb human settlements. Just a small reminder of who was in charge. Put on his diplomatic robes and looked at himself in the mirror. He looked old. He looked defeated. He wondered if his ancestors would recognize him, this broken man who bowed and smiled while his people suffered. But deep inside, in a place he rarely allowed himself to visit, was angry. He had been angry for 15 years, and that anger was growing. That night, Admiral Mercer held a secret meeting in an underground bunker beneath the ruins of old New York. 12 people sat around a table lit by a single lamp. They were engineers, scientists, doctors, and former soldiers. They were the keepers of forbidden knowledge. "The time is coming," Daniel said softly. "I can feel it. The aliens grow bolder every year. They have forgotten what we are. They see our patience and call it weakness. They see our kindness and call it submission." He looked around the table at the faces of his most trusted allies. "But we remember. We have always remembered. And when the moment comes, when they finally push too far, we will remind them of a truth they have forgotten." He stood up slowly, his old bones protesting, but his voice was strong. "They think they caged wolves 1,000 years ago. They were wrong. They caged something far more dangerous. They caged creatures who learned to wait, who learned to plan, who learned to hide their fangs behind gentle smiles." Daniel Mercer looked up at the ceiling, as if he could see through the rock and soil to the stars above. "We are humanity. We have always been predators, and predators never truly forget how to hunt." The meeting ended in silence. The 12 members went back to their ordinary lives, their ordinary jobs, their ordinary masks. But in their hearts, they carried the same fire that had burned in their ancestors. They were waiting. They had always been waiting. And somewhere in the galaxy, the aliens continued to laugh at the harmless humans, never knowing that every joke, every insult, every act of cruelty was being remembered. The wolves were patient. The wolves were watching. And the wolves were almost ready. The crown prince of the empire was bored. His name was Vex, and he had everything a prince could want. Palaces made of crystal, servants who trembled at his voice, fleets of warships waiting for his command, but none of it excited him anymore. He wanted glory. He wanted to prove himself before his coronation next year. He wanted the galaxy to speak his name with fear and respect. And then he had an idea. "Humans," he said to his advisors, a cruel smile spreading across his face, "I want to hunt humans." His advisors looked at each other nervously. Hunting humans was not exactly forbidden, but it was usually done quietly. A few deaths here and there, nothing too dramatic. But Vex wanted drama. He wanted the whole galaxy to watch. "The colony called New Haven," he continued. "It is small, weak, far from Earth. We will broadcast the hunt live across all channels. The galaxy will see what happens to those who exist only by our mercy." 3 days later, 15 warships appeared in the sky above New Haven. The colonists had no weapons. They had no ships capable of fighting. They had only their homes, their farms, and their families. The hunt began at midnight. Soldiers moved through the streets with pulse rifles and plasma cannons. They kicked down doors. They dragged people from their beds. They laughed as humans ran and screamed and begged for mercy. Tors was not on New Haven that night. She was on Earth, 200 light-years away, watching the broadcast on a small screen in her apartment. She watched as hunters chased a young mother through the fields. She watched as an old man was shot in the back while trying to protect his. She watched as her own cousin, a quiet farmer named, was beaten to death on live video for the entertainment of the galaxy. By morning, 3,000 humans were dead. The crown prince stood among the bodies and smiled for the cameras. "Let this be a lesson," he announced. "Humans exist because we allow them to exist. Never forget your place." Across the galaxy, billions watched. Some cheered. Some shook their heads at the brutality but said nothing. And some, a small number, felt a strange fear growing in their hearts. The oldest among them remembered stories from long ago. Stories about what happened when you pushed humans too far. On Earth, Tors sat in the darkness of her apartment. The screen had gone black, but she could still see the images burned into her mind. Had taught her to ride a bicycle when she was 6. He had sent her birthday messages every year. He had been gentle and kind and had never hurt anyone in his life. And now he was dead, murdered for entertainment. Something broke inside that night. Something that had been holding back her rage for years finally shattered. She walked to Admiral Mercer's home as the sun rose. The old man was already awake, already watching the news, already knowing why she had come. "I am tired of waiting," said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were on fire. "I know," Daniel replied softly. "They killed my family. They killed 3,000 innocent people, and the galaxy laughed." "I know." Stepped closer. "You told me there would be a time. You told me to be patient. You told me the moment would come." She pointed toward the window, toward the sky where alien ships still patrolled. "Is this not the moment?" Admiral Mercer was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "this is the moment." 3 days later, Ambassador stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from 100 different species. Humans were given seats in the very back, behind a pillar that blocked their view of the main stage. Walk to the center of the chamber. This was against protocol. Humans were supposed to wait until called upon, but was done with protocol. "I demand justice," he said loudly. "The Empire murdered 3,000 of my people. I demand that the Crown Prince be held accountable." Silence fell over the chamber. Then slowly, laughter began to spread. The delegate, a tall female with silver skin, leaned forward with amusement. "Have the pets learned to bark?" she asked. More laughter. The representative, a massive creature covered in scales, stood up. "Be grateful, human. They only killed 3,000. They could have destroyed the entire colony. Perhaps you should thank the Crown Prince for his restraint." The laughter grew louder. Stood in the center of that laughter. He felt it washing over him like waves of poison. He thought about his parents, who had died believing there might see a better future. He thought about the children of New Haven who would never grow up. He thought about every insult, every joke, every humiliation he had endured for 15 years. And then he did something that no human had done in 1,000 years. He reached up and removed his diplomatic sash. He folded it carefully and placed it on the floor. The laughter began to fade as the aliens watched this strange behavior. "I am no longer speaking as a diplomat," said. His voice was calm and clear. "I am speaking as a representative of the human species." He looked around the chamber at the confused faces. "Under the old laws, the laws that your ancestors signed when they first defeated us, there is a provision. Section 7, paragraph 12. It grants any protected species the right to withdraw from protection if certain conditions are met." The delegate stopped smiling. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that 3,000 innocent deaths fulfill those conditions." Eyes met hers. "Humanity invokes the right of retribution. As of this moment, we withdraw from protected status." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates laughed again, thinking it was a joke. Others began shouting questions, but the oldest delegates, the ones who remembered the ancient histories, went very pale. A elder in the back of the chamber stood up shakily. Her face was filled with something the younger delegates did not recognize. It was fear. "You cannot," she whispered, but her voice carried across the suddenly quiet chamber. "You cannot do this." "We just did," replied. That same night, Tors received a message on her personal device. It contained coordinates to a moon she had never heard of and a single sentence: "The Sleeper's Wake." She traveled alone, telling no one where she was going. The moon was barren and cold, officially listed as uninhabited. But when she landed and entered the ancient tunnels that wound deep beneath the surface, she found something extraordinary. The cavern was vast. Rows of storage units stretched into the darkness, preserved in perfect condition for 1,000 years. Walked among them, reading the labels with growing amazement. These were not weapons. They were something far more valuable. Training manuals from humanity's golden age. Strategic databases containing every battle humanity had ever fought. Psychological profiles of every alien species. Engineering blueprints for ships that the galaxy thought had been destroyed centuries ago. This was the complete military knowledge of a species that had once been the most feared in 3 galaxies. Hidden away, protected, waiting for the day when humanity would need it again. Picked up one of the data tablets and activated it. The screen glowed to life, showing ancient symbols that she recognized from Admiral Mercer's secret lessons. "Welcome, soldier," the tablet said in a voice that sounded almost human. "You have been selected to receive the legacy of your ancestors. Study these records carefully. Learn what we knew, become what we were." Tors sat down in that ancient cavern, surrounded by the forgotten knowledge of her people, and began to read. Outside, the galaxy continued to laugh at the foolish humans and their meaningless declaration. They would not be laughing for much longer. The message went out across human space in the days that followed. It was hidden in ordinary communications, buried in shipping reports and weather updates and personal letters. Only those who knew what to look for could find it. Admiral Daniel Mercer sat in his underground command center and watched the responses come in. Hundreds of them, then thousands. From every human colony, from every corner of Earth, from places the aliens did not even know humans lived. The network was awakening. A cargo hauler named Tors, who could calculate hyperspace jumps in her head faster than any computer. A mechanic named Cole, who had spent 40 years pretending to fix civilian transports while secretly designing warships in his notebooks. A doctor named Price, who had mapped the biological weaknesses of every major alien species under the cover of academic research. They came from ordinary jobs and ordinary lives. They came from generations of families who had passed down forbidden knowledge in secret. They came because their ancestors had made a promise, and they intended to keep it. The hidden shipyard was located in the rings of Saturn, disguised as a mining operation. Cole had built it over 30 years, piece by piece, hiding the construction inside legitimate cargo shipments. From the outside, it looked like nothing special. From the inside, it was humanity's last hope. Arrived at the shipyard 3 weeks after discovering the ancient archives. She carried data tablets filled with knowledge that had been lost for centuries. When she handed them to, the old engineer's hands trembled. "I dreamed of this day," he said quietly. "My grandfather told me stories about ships like these. I thought they were just legends." "They were real," replied, "and we are going to build them again." The work began immediately. Engineers who had spent their lives repairing alien vessels now worked on something far more advanced. Scientists who had hidden their true skills behind fake degrees now calculated weapon systems. Pilots who had pretended to be simple traders now trained in combat simulations that pushed them to their limits. They built ships unlike anything the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. Human ships did not look like the elegant cruisers of the, or the massive dreadnoughts of the. Human ships looked dangerous. They were covered in weapons and armor. They were designed to take damage and keep fighting. They were built by a species that had evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill them. Admiral Mercer called them adaptive. They were not just machines. They could learn. They could evolve during combat. They could analyze enemy tactics and adjust their own strategies in real time. The aliens had nothing like them. Meanwhile, the crown prince of the empire grew impatient. His hunt on New Haven had been a success, but the thrill was already fading. He wanted more. He wanted to crush the humans completely, to prove that their foolish declaration meant nothing. "Attack Earth's moon," he ordered his admirals. "Show them that their words are empty." 47 warships jumped into the Sol system 1 month after the massacre at New Haven. They expected no resistance. They expected the humans to cower and beg for mercy. They found the USS Resilient waiting for them. The Resilient was a single ship, smaller than even the smallest vessel. Captain Torres stood on its bridge with 50 volunteers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The admiral laughed when he saw the tiny human ship. "One vessel," he said to his officers. "They send one vessel against 47. These creatures truly are as stupid as we believed." He ordered his fleet to destroy the Resilient and continue toward the moon. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Torres did not fight like the humans the remembered from history. She did not form defensive lines or retreat when damaged. She flew the Resilient straight into the heart of the enemy fleet, weaving between their ships so fast that they could barely track her. The Resilient's weapons fired in patterns they could not predict. The ship seemed to know where enemy shots would land before they were fired. When they finally managed to hit it, the Resilient simply absorbed the damage and kept attacking. The human crew moved with perfect coordination. They did not panic. They did not hesitate. They fought like wolves hunting prey that had forgotten how to fear them. When the 11th minute ended, 47 ships had become 47 fields of debris. The Crown Prince's personal vessel barely escaped, jumping to hyperspace with half its systems destroyed. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. News broadcasts that had been preparing to show the destruction of humanity's last resistance instead showed something impossible. A single human ship had destroyed an entire fleet. The footage spread across every channel, every network, every planet. On Prime, the elder delegate who had spoken at the council watched the battle recording over and over. Her silver face had gone pale. Her hands would not stop shaking. "It cannot be," she whispered to herself. "They were broken, they were tame, they were supposed to be harmless." But the evidence was undeniable. The humans had remembered how to fight, and they fought like nothing the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. Back at the Saturn shipyard, Torres returned to cheering crowds. Engineers and workers and soldiers lifted her on their shoulders. For the first time in generations, humans had won a battle against their oppressors. Admiral Mercer was waiting in the command center. He did not cheer. His face was serious as he watched the celebration. "This was just the beginning," he told when she finally reached him. "They will not forgive this embarrassment. Neither will thee or the. They will come at us with everything they have." Nodded, she had known this from the moment she decided to fight. "How long do we have?" "Months, maybe. Long enough to finish the fleet. Long enough to prepare for what comes next." He turned to face her directly. His old eyes were filled with something that might have been pride or might have been sorrow. "You did well today, Captain. Your ancestors would be proud. But the real war has not yet started. Today we reminded the galaxy that we know how to fight. Soon, we will have to show them why they should never have made us remember." In the weeks that followed, more ships were completed. More crews were trained. More humans joined the cause. They came from everywhere, drawn by the news of the Resilient's victory. They came because they were tired of being mocked. They came because they had lost family to alien cruelty. They came because something ancient in their blood had finally awakened. The galaxy continued to watch and worry. The older species began sharing forbidden histories with the younger ones. Stories of the Great War, stories of human ferocity, stories of a species that had evolved as both predator and prey, that refused to die no matter how many times you killed them. The Dominion began reinforcing their border fleets. The collective called emergency sessions of their military council. The Empire demanded vengeance but found fewer volunteers willing to face human ships. And in the hidden shipyards of humanity, the wolves continued to sharpen their fangs. The time of hiding was over. The time of pretending was finished. Humanity was awake, and the galaxy was finally beginning to remember why that was something to fear. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. The great chamber that had once echoed with laughter at human expense was now filled with fear and confusion. The younger delegates did not understand what was happening. They had grown up believing humans were weak and harmless. They had been taught that the old stories were exaggerated propaganda. But the older delegates knew the truth. They had always known. The elder, whose name was, stood before the council with a data tablet in her trembling hands. She was over 800 years old, one of the few beings still alive who remembered the time before human subjugation. "I must share something with you," she said quietly. "Something we swore never to speak of again, something we tried to erase from history." She activated the tablet, and holographic images filled the chamber. They showed ancient battles, ancient records, ancient footage that had been locked away for a millennium. "This is what humans truly were," said. The younger delegates watched in growing horror. The first image showed a human soldier continuing to fight after losing an arm, then losing a leg, then crawling toward the enemy with a weapon clenched in her remaining hand. The warriors who faced her were backing away in terror. The second image showed a human warship, badly damaged, its hull torn open to space. The crew should have been dead. Instead, they had sealed themselves in a single surviving compartment, patched the holes with their own bodies, and continued fighting for 6 more hours until reinforcements arrived. The third image showed a human general named Alexander speaking to his troops before a battle against the outnumbered them 20-1. The general simply smiled and said, "Good. That means we can attack in any direction." They won that battle. "We fought a war against humans that lasted a century," continued. "Every time we thought we had won, they came back. Every time we thought we had broken them, they rebuilt. We killed millions of them. They replaced their losses and kept fighting. We destroyed their worlds. They colonized new ones and kept fighting. We used weapons that should have driven any species to extinction. They adapted and kept fighting." She paused, her voice shaking. "Do you understand what I am telling you? Humans do not surrender. Humans do not give up. Humans do not know when they are supposed to die. They simply refuse." A young commander stood up angrily. "Then how did we defeat them? If they were so powerful, how did we win the war?" Looked at him with ancient, tired eyes. "We did not defeat them. We convinced them to stop fighting. We offered them peace. We promised to leave them alone if they gave up their weapons. And because humans are also a kind species, a species that does not enjoy war, they agreed." She turned to face the full council. "We did not conquer humanity. We tricked them into caging themselves. And for 1,000 years, we have been mocking the wolves we were too afraid to actually kill." The chamber fell silent. The younger delegates were beginning to understand the magnitude of the mistake their ancestors had made. At that moment, a communication screen activated. The face of Admiral Daniel Mercer appeared, calm and patient, like a grandfather about to tell a story. "Members of the Galactic Council," he said, "I hope I am not interrupting anything important." Chaos erupted. Delegates shouted and pointed. Security forces raised their weapons at the screen as if they could shoot through it. Daniel waited for the noise to die down. When it did, he continued in the same gentle voice. "I am Admiral Daniel Mercer of the United Human Fleet. I am speaking to you today because I believe you deserve an explanation. You deserve to understand what is happening and why." He clasped his hands in front of him, like a teacher preparing a lesson. "For 1,000 years, my people endured your mockery. We let you believe we were tame. We let you believe we were broken. We did this because we hoped, truly hoped, that we could earn peace through patience. We thought that if we were kind enough, gentle enough, patient enough, you would eventually accept us as equals." His expression hardened slightly. "But you killed our children, 3,000 innocent people on New Haven, and when we asked for justice, you laughed. You actually laughed." The chamber was completely silent now. "So now we will remind you of a simple truth. We were never your pets. We were always your predators. We chose not to hunt because we preferred peace. We hid our fangs because we hoped we would never need them again." Daniel leaned forward, and despite his age, despite his gentle voice, something ancient and dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You forced us to remember what we are, and now you will face the consequences." The screen went dark. In the hours that followed, reports began flooding into the Council from across the galaxy. Human fleets were appearing everywhere, not from Earth, but from places no one expected. Hidden shipyards in dead systems, bases carved into the ice of frozen moons, factories buried deep inside asteroids that had been written off as worthless. Humanity had not been sleeping for 1,000 years. They had been preparing. "This is impossible," the Crown Prince shouted at his admirals. "Where did these ships come from? How could they hide an entire fleet from our sensors?" His senior advisor, an old warrior who had studied human history, looked at him with tired eyes. "Your Highness, humans evolved on a death world, a planet where everything was trying to kill them at all times. They learned to hide, to plan, to wait. They are the greatest ambush predators the galaxy has ever seen. Of course they hid ships from our sensors. That is what they do." The gathered his fleet commanders for a briefing. He showed them the footage of the Resilient destroying 47 ships. "Study this battle carefully," he ordered. "Learn how they fight, find their weaknesses." His commanders watched the footage again and again. They analyzed every movement, every tactic, every shot fired. After 3 days of study, the senior commander came to them with his report. "We cannot find any weaknesses," he admitted. "Their tactics change constantly. Their ships adapt faster than we can adjust, and their crews—" he shook his head in disbelief. "Their crews do not behave like any enemy we have ever faced. They show no fear. They do not hesitate. It is as if they have been waiting their entire lives for this war." There was silence for a long moment. Then he asked quietly, "Can we beat them?" His commander did not answer. He did not need to. Across the galaxy, the ancient fear was spreading. Species that had mocked humans for generations now looked at their neighbors with worried eyes. Governments that had laughed at human ambassadors now held emergency meetings to discuss survival strategies. And in the darkness between the stars, human ships moved silently toward their targets, crewed by soldiers who had trained in secret for their entire lives, guided by knowledge that had been preserved for a millennium. The wolves were no longer hiding. The wolves were no longer waiting. The wolves were hunting. And the galaxy, at long last, was beginning to remember why that was something to fear. The final battle would take place above Prime, the capital world of the species that had first proposed humanity's subjugation. They knew the humans were coming. They had weeks to prepare. They called in every ship, every ally, every weapon they could gather. 10,000 warships assembled in orbit around Prime. The combined military might of the Collective, the Dominion, and the Empire hung in space like a wall of steel and fire. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. The human fleet numbered 187 ships. Admiral Daniel Mercer stood on the bridge of the USS Endurance, watching the enemy formation on his screens. Beside him stood Captain Torres, Commander Stark, and dozens of other officers who had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "enemy forces outnumber us approximately 53 to 1. Daniel nodded calmly. "Noted." "Looked at him," orders Admiral. The old man smiled slightly. "Captain Torres, you have studied our ancestors' battles. You have memorized their tactics. Tell me, what would they do in this situation?" Thought for a moment, then she smiled too. "They would attack." "Then that is what we will do." The human fleet moved forward. On the flagship, Admiral watched the tiny human formation approaching. She had volunteered to command the defense, even though she was terrified. Someone had to face the humans, and she at least understood what they truly were. "They are insane," her tactical officer said. "They cannot possibly think they can win against these odds." Shook her head slowly. "You still do not understand. Humans do not calculate odds the way we do. They do not look at a battle and ask themselves if they can win. They ask themselves if the cause is worth dying for, and if the answer is yes, they fight. They always fight." The battle began. Human ships did not form defensive lines or advance in organized formations. They scattered like wolves attacking a herd, each ship choosing its own targets, moving in patterns that seemed random but were actually perfectly coordinated. The aliens fired thousands of weapons at once. Space filled with plasma and missiles and energy beams. Any other fleet would have been destroyed in seconds. But the human ships dodged and weaved through the storm of fire like they could predict where every shot would land. They slipped between enemy vessels, firing at point-blank range, then vanishing before the aliens could respond. "They are too fast," a commander shouted over the communication channels. "We cannot lock onto them." "Their ships are learning our firing patterns," a captain reported in disbelief. "They are adapting in real time." On the Endurance, Admiral Mercer gave orders with quiet precision. His crews moved with perfect efficiency. Every shot hit its target. Every maneuver was calculated to cause maximum confusion among the enemy. But the true terror came from something simpler. Human ships that were badly damaged kept fighting. Vessels that should have been destroyed continued to fire their weapons. Crews that should have been dead found ways to keep their ships running with nothing but willpower and determination. A destroyer managed to land a direct hit on a human frigate, tearing through its hull and destroying half its systems. The frigate should have exploded. Instead, its crew sealed the damaged sections, rerouted power through backup systems, and returned fire with enough force to destroy the ship. A battleship rammed a human cruiser, trying to crush it. The cruiser's captain responded by steering directly into the impact, punching through the vessel's armor and detonating a device inside the enemy ship. The cruiser was destroyed, but so were 3 ships nearby. The aliens began to break, not because they were losing more ships, but because they could not psychologically process what they were facing. Every tactic they tried was countered. Every advantage they exploited was overcome. Every killing blow they landed only seemed to make the humans angrier. "Retreat!" the Crown Prince screamed from his flagship. "All vessels retreat!" His ship tried to turn and run. Captain Torres intercepted him. The battle between the Resilient and the Crown Prince's flagship lasted 4 minutes. Dismantled his defenses systematically, precisely, like a surgeon removing a disease. When his shields finally fell and his engines died, she targeted his bridge directly. The Crown Prince's final transmission was a single word: impossible. Then his ship exploded. Across the battlefield, the alien alliance was collapsing. They ordered his remaining ships to jump to hyperspace, abandoning the fleet was already scattering in panic. Admiral stood alone on her flagship's bridge. Her crew had abandoned their stations. Her allies had fled. Her weapons were empty. She had nothing left. She opened a communication channel to the human fleet. "Admiral Mercer," she said quietly, "I am prepared to discuss terms of surrender." The old human's face appeared on her screen. He looked tired, but there was no hatred in his eyes, only a deep, weary sadness. "I accept your surrender," he replied. "Order your remaining ships to stand down, and no more lives will be lost today." 1 hour later, the surviving alien commanders gathered in a neutral station to formalize the treaty. Admiral knelt before Daniel Mercer, a gesture no had made to another species in recorded history. "Rise," Daniel said gently. "We did not fight this war to humiliate you. We fought it to stop being humiliated ourselves." He looked around at the defeated commanders, the broken fleets, the end of an era that had lasted 1,000 years. "Our terms are simple: equality, true equality. Humans will rejoin the galaxy not as pets or as conquerors but as partners. No more protected status. No more mockery. No more hunting our people for sport. We will work together, trade together, and build together, or we will fight again. The choice is yours." The commanders agreed. They had no other option. As Daniel Mercer signed the treaty, asked him quietly, "Were you truly preparing for war all this time, waiting for the moment to strike?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, we were preparing so that we would never have to fight. We preserved our strength hoping we would never need it. We spent 1,000 years trying to prove that we could be trusted, that we were worthy of peace." He looked at her with ancient, tired eyes. "You forced us to remember what we were. We never wanted to be feared. We just wanted to be left alone. But if you make us choose between peace and survival, we will always choose survival. Now you understand why that is a choice you should never force us to make." 1 year later, Ambassador took his seat at the Galactic Council, not in the back behind a pillar, at the center table where humanity finally belonged. Captain Torres commanded the USS Resolute on a peacekeeping mission, protecting a colony from raiders. The colonists watched human soldiers defend them with the same ferocity that had once terrified the galaxy, but now that ferocity was protecting them. Admiral Daniel Mercer retired to Earth. He spent his remaining years teaching history to children, not the history of war, but the history of what humanity had endured and how they had chosen in the end to answer cruelty with mercy. Because that, he told them, was what truly made humanity strong, not their capacity for violence, not their refusal to die, but their ability to survive violence, to remember it, to prepare for it, and still choose peace whenever peace was possible. The galaxy had mocked humans for a millennium. They had called them pets and soft ones and mistake species. They had laughed at human kindness and called it weakness. Now the galaxy remembered the truth. Human kindness was never weakness. It was a choice made by a species that knew exactly what they were capable of, exactly how much damage they could cause, exactly how much fear they could inspire. Humans chose kindness because they understood the alternative. And now, finally, the galaxy understood too. The wolves had won, but they had not become monsters. They had remained human. That was why they had always been feared, and that was why they would always be remembered.